for accepting my presentation. What I want to talk to you about this morning is it's not really my work, but it's just a review of what's been going on in Kent. And this is a review of tiny pockets of it that I've been involved in. Okay, so I want to talk to you about the different Dreamlands, and I was in Margate at the Turner Contemporary 10 days ago at the most amazing plant fair, and also, of course, the fantastic Sonia Boyce exhibition on the right. Now, the picture on the left looks like my mother, who used to go down to Kent from the East End in the 1930s. She was sent down for her lungs to work on a farm down there, and her brother, who was asthmatic, also went down. So there's a strong Kentish tradition. Okay, so I'm just going to mention some of these projects because in the last 20 years or so that I've been involved in tourism and heritage in Kent, we've gone through so many permutations of culture, and they've actually brought us on, some of them, quite a long way. So just to revisit these different initiatives. First of all, Canterbury and East Kent, our UK Capital of Culture bid for the millennium. Then Kent's Creative Coast and the Transformation Agenda of 2013. East Kent, a City Reimagined, UK City of Culture bid in 2017. COVID, Medway 2025 and the Levelling Up bids, but I'll just touch on these quite briefly. So, who remembers the Transformation Agenda? I'm sure you do, but quite shockingly, it was based on the idea that we had an oversupply of creative industry production. So it's quite shocking to rethink this and reflect on that perspective at the time. And that was when something enormous happened in the public sector, and I, having worked at the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden for 11 years, then at Canterbury City Council on tourism development, which involved cultural events, World Heritage Site, Whitstable's regeneration, it was quite shocking to move into a position where the public sector was brokering, commissioning and co-creating rather than pushing agendas forward. That led to some really healthy projects, but arguably that was it was just an argument almost to withdraw funding. It was quite shocking at the time. I was on the Transformation Board for Kent at the time because I was also involved in the UK City of Culture 2017 bid, which we were working on in East Kent in 2013. And its aim was, in a nutshell, to take our fantastic heritage and diversify away from it by making the most of it in different cultural forms. So it was the idea that we had a very distinctive and separate heritage and cultural industry, and it was the official bringing together of these, which has led to some absolutely amazing partnerships over the years. But again, this was quite a new thing when it was introduced. So dance performances in Beanie, I remember the new emphasis on public health and arts, because the money was in public health and we wanted that sponsorship. So museums on prescription and other fantastic initiatives where you could nip into the Beanie and get yourself diagnosed, and then they'd recommend a picture to look at, which was just amazing. So again, there was a shift in our perspective, following the money in this case. Our 2013 bid was fantastic because it brought so many different partners together across particularly East Kent at the time. So from Jasmine Vardaman through to obviously Turner Contemporary, etc. And we looked at three themes: the Innovation Lab, our cyber city, Flux Factory, which was rebranding the movement through Kent, which is seen as a transit county, into a cultural phenomenon, tracing the pilgrimage through to migration themes at the time. And then the collective, the concept of all the new collaborations we had between different bodies, which was all quite innovative at the time. Well, not really, there'd always been these unofficial things, but it was a sort of showcasing of these particular themes. When we were writing it, I began to picture Kent a bit more like maybe Singapore in my brain. Innovation Factory, Flux, Innovation Lab, Flux Factory, the collective. It sounded really skyscrapery to me, and I wasn't absolutely sure that we were in Kent. But we made the most of our amazing distinctiveness as well. So we challenged other cities bidding for UK Capital of Culture. These are our fantastic lifestyle city limits, our cliffs, etc. You're a city in that sense. We're a city in a different sense. Okay. The idea, I'm not going to go through these in depth, but the idea was to build a legacy, change social, economic and cultural growth, develop and drive arts programming up to 2021, articulate evidence of how arts programming builds social capital, which I'm so proud that Christchurch was at the forefront of, with some amazing projects at Turner Contemporary. Collate, secure and articulate evidence of how the arts and culture and heritage builds a sense of place and pride. How we can collate evidence of how we can shape communities through creativity and determine and share best models of arts programming. Okay, so it was fantastic because, again, for the political landscape, it took things that perhaps we as creative and arts professionals would see as self-evident and put them up there so that into terms everybody could understand. We also had a theme of grow for it, which was based on the seminal Garden of England brand. Okay. We didn't get that bid, we weren't successful because of the transportation areas in Kent. And the conclusion was that the practical issues related to geography meant there was a delivery impact. It was an ambitious bid, selling East Kent as a city, and they said the problem was, for a City of Culture year of events, there was such a large polycentric area with so many organisations involved, it was a significant risk. Now, I'd argue our polycentricity, if that's the word, sorry, I hate these, you know, we develop these academies, this jargon, but our polycentric nature in Kent is our great strength and fantastic, as I'll go on to discuss. Okay, so all of this tapped into an initiative that was really, I suppose, encapsulated by Katrina Campbell's fantastic Kent's Creative Coast initiative. And if you remember, we began with the opening of Turner Contemporary, with the Folkestone Triennial, with Whitstable Biennale, to link our creative offer up into a really strong, and it's performing really well, initiative. Okay, and here is the wonderful White Horses Whitstable art event, which some of you may remember from a few years ago. And this taps into a concept of creative tourism, which I've always held in mind, which I teach, and which Katrina Campbell was very, very aware of when she talked about Kent's Creative Coast in 2010. And it was the idea that creative tourism, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, I'll come back to it, is sustainable, small scale, co-created and co-produced. Now, I find these principles, and I'm going to return to them in a different slide, to sketch a way forward, and this symposium is about reimagining Kent in the light of all these different initiatives and Levelling Up Fund, are really super tried and tested principles for the future. Okay. There was also a concept around 2013, which again I want to touch on because it's just wonderful. I found it so exciting preparing for this symposium, because I revisited all these projects that you sort of forget as they get absorbed into our zeitgeist. And the idea of creative stewardship, the idea that we merged heritage with culture to create new associations and bring out that fantastic heritage story that is then performed in a cultural platform. And if I might say, Kent Maps Online absolutely encapsulates this fantastic spirit. And I was absolutely knocked for six by Michelle's description of all the different projects you've covered in all the different genres. It was jaw-dropping. Okay, so moving on to the present, and then we'll talk about the future. I was very lucky to be I represented Christchurch on Canterbury's Levelling Up Fund bid, the stakeholder group. And for the last, well, for 3 years, starting over 3 years ago, I was part of a group who met with Canterbury City Council, was involved Steve Allen from the Pound, who's driven various initiatives forward, and the stakeholders across Canterbury in envisioning the future and Canterbury's Tales of England. And what we were looking at was the concept of how we could build on the heritage public realm for storytelling in a nutshell. We were aware that our key assets like the castle needed repairing, but also their stories repairing and promoting. So there was a really rich and exciting series of connections that could be made. Out of this has come a bid that was successful for 19.9 million, which is based on, again, addressing the public realm, wayfaring, which is highly significant for us as the university, a programme of these amazing story gardens, which include statues of the fantastic Afra Ben and other key storytellers in Canterbury, and interpretation. And while I'm a tourist specialist, I just want to add quickly here, should have said this earlier, that I consider myself a tourist when I go to Margate. I live in Ashford, and if I travel to Margate to see an exhibition, I become a creative and cultural tourist. Okay? So tourism is for a local resident. We all become tourists as well. We've also developed, it's so exciting, we've just got the first draft of a new World Heritage Site Management Plan. And this emphasises the connectivity between the 3 sites, the centrality of the World Heritage Site that we are part of now, sitting in our venues, you in your venues in Christchurch, and when we teach, we're centred to a World Heritage Site, and it is centred to Canterbury and all of Canterbury's stories. And we've got Ralph Norman's amazing project on Global Canterbury, which really encapsulates this too. But what our draft management plan is taking forward is, and I'm part of, again, this group, the management team working on this, is the outstanding universal value of our world heritage and how we express this to the world and to local residents. We feel that we need to raise awareness of the World Heritage Site and increase its accessibility. And I'd actually, and don't panic, this won't be happening, but I'd actually during COVID just wondered if we had a trail on the pavements that was like the markings and the decals we had, that sort of said World Heritage Site absolutely everywhere. And what we want to develop is something that says you're 20 minutes away from St Martin's Church, you're 10 minutes away from St Martin's Church, so that people can meaningfully walk on these trails with confidence. And people visiting us, perhaps from America, who come specifically to see our World Heritage Site because of its fantastic significance, don't feel uncertain about going to St Martin's because of the distance, and they're worried about their car parking or their train or their coach. So the idea is to improve the legibility of the site for everybody. And how exciting to think we and our students and local residents will be repeatedly reminded of the stories through on-street interpretation. Right, so moving on to the future, that is the last section of the presentation. Richard said that cultural tourism is more of a passive pursuit. And as I said, as a resident, you can be a cultural tourist. Creative tourism, however, is small scale, sustainable, active, so it involves learning and experiential creation. It's co-created and co-produced with hosts, and even those hosts who are invisible. So the storytellers of the past, whose wonderful oral histories the Magic Hour project has captured, are with us, storytelling, the creation of values, and it avoids serial reproduction because it's locally distinctive. Okay. And when I use the word tourism, as I said, I mean for everybody. So you could almost take the tourism out of this. So just a few examples of some projects that have absolutely blown me away in Kent recently. Ashford Unframed, put on by the indefatigable Chris Dixon, champion of culture in Ashford, where I live. He's done some amazing work, and this was a fantastic mural trail. As you can see, there's Mr. Doodle on a local brutalist car park. There was the most fantastic mural trail of birds and local figures and fingers and modern art throughout Ashford, which really did transform its built architecture and actually portray its heritage and history. Reviving the cinemas, as we just heard, this is my lovely collaborator Howard, because I stage light shows as one of my cultural pursuits, who has gone around Kent lighting the different cinemas that are derelict, or this one is used for Poundland in Chatham, and really throwing a light on their past. And I'm sure Corinne is connected up with Howard already. Co-producing stories, and here we have Ashford Light Trail, which I went to, and it was jaw-dropping. The whole community was out there reclaiming the streets, which were unsafe sometimes at night, but families were there. And this is the wonderful thing about light shows, they really do bring people out into the streets. The light show at Cheriton, people come out wrapped in their duvets on a really cold night, and everybody is there, just pouring out of their front doors. Also co-producing with local hosts, and this was the wonderful Moat Park Light Trail in Maidstone, which is all about enchantment. And again, another light fixture from the Ashford Light Show here. So co-producing stories, working with hosts, that's residents, to hear about their experiences and making connections where people share their expertise. And I think about the fossil hunting I did as part of the Folkestone event this year with a local expert. Enchanting audiences. And my research has shown that when we encounter something extraordinary, we are enchanted, and there's a whole theory of behaviour for this. We stop physically in our tracks because we can't compute quite what we're seeing. So we're physically still and mentally hyper aware. That's enchantment in a nutshell. And what we want to do is astonish our audiences. And this is the winter light trails that have emerged all over Kent, from Warmer Castle to Leeds Castle and Bedgebury. Also, free on-street culture and heritage. And this was the light show Rochester a few years ago, which did say the number of us who live below the poverty line. It made points, hard-hitting points about women, and it was designed involving young adults. So there was trance music, there were other sorts of music, and young dancers really portraying young people's stories, because often young adults are missing from all of this. So art and heritage places and local stories, and free. And this was Chatham's light show this year, where we reclaimed, again, I'm not going to say that brutalist buildings are ugly, but the great big concrete megaliths on our streets. And then also Magi heritage. Okay, so Magi heritage is the amazing, so it's coming out as Maggie heritage, like Maggie Thatcher, no, at the bottom of the slide. But Magi heritage, that's an idea I've had where, and it perhaps something like the wonderful Diane's work, which we're going to hear about this afternoon. She also works with the idea of genius loci, or spirits of place. And the concept of Magi heritage is that when we encounter some heritage buildings, they're actually magical to us because we've seen them on the backdrop of so many fantasy genres on television and film. So fantasy has been mainstreamed on these different platforms in recent years, as we all know, with Lord of the Rings, The Witcher, and many other different Game of Thrones, and all of these different programmes, and they feature heritage buildings. So when people visit Canterbury, they say, wow, this is like Hobbiton. They don't they link it with the heritage. Here's me on the right with my people. So Tenterden, also the folk traditions, which we're going to hear about next, which are, superb. I'm so looking forward to the next presentation. And I've been researching fairy festivals across the country, and these amazing folkloric traditions that everything is built on and constructed by, that are part of our fantastic, intangible cultural heritage. And lastly, those fantastic ideas of storytelling, whether it's visually through painting our beach huts from Folkestone Triennial through to the apple tourists here at Perrycourt Farm near Ashford. My friends around the country and across the world are blown away by my Instagram feed, because they say, my goodness, every weekend you're at a different fantastic event. How does this happen? How does this one county produce so much variety? And so we should be incredibly proud of this. So to finish, I'd like to finish with the idea of almost future dreaming. I think this is what today is about, these mind-blowing examples of these small and different stories that add up to a very big patchwork quilt, which perhaps describes Kent Maps Online. And our job is to reveal them. Make it outdoors. So put these stories out there for everybody, make them free and make them sustainable. Small scale, make them co-produced, so involving residents and communities in the telling of stories that are then spread around the world. Make them magical, so tap into those fantastic folkloric ideas that we're going to hear about next, and also other voices and other heritages which are joining together with ours